The quiet manipulation. Have you ever bought something and later wondered why you bought it? Not whether you needed it, but why you felt the need so strongly. Have you ever noticed how urgency feels physical? Your chest tightens, your thoughts speed up, your logic goes silent. And here is the unsettling part. Most of those reactions are predictable, not because you are weak, but because you are human. Modern marketing is not built on guesswork anymore. It is built on decades of cognitive science, behavioral economics, neuroscience, and social psychology. Researchers like Daniel Kahneman, Amos Tversky, Robert Cialdini, Richard Thaler, Dan Ariely, B.F. Skinner, and many others have mapped how humans actually make decisions, and marketers have been paying attention. Today, we are not demonizing marketing, we are dissecting it. Because once you understand the mechanisms, you stop reacting and start choosing. You do not decide rationally, and that is normal. For decades, classical economics assumed humans were rational decision makers. That assumption collapsed in 1979. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky introduced prospect theory, showing that people consistently make decisions based on perceived gains and losses rather than objective outcomes. Their research demonstrated two critical truths. First, losses feel psychologically about twice as powerful as gains. Second, we evaluate outcomes relative to reference points, not in absolute terms. This changed everything. Marketing does not try to prove something is objectively valuable. It tries to frame it relative to something else. That framing becomes your reference point. And once that reference point is set, your perception shifts. Not because you are irrational, but because your brain relies on mental shortcuts to conserve energy. Anchoring. The first number wins. One of the most replicated cognitive biases in psychology is anchoring. In early experiments by Tversky and Kahneman, participants spun a wheel rigged to land on either 10 or 65. Afterward, they were asked whether the percentage of African nations in the United Nations was higher or lower than the number shown. Those who saw 65 gave significantly higher estimates than those who saw 10. The number was random. It still influenced judgment. That is anchoring. When a website shows you a regular price of $1,200 crossed out next to a sale price of $599, the $1,200 becomes your anchor. Even if no one realistically pays $1,200, the first number creates the mental baseline. Everything after that feels like a comparison. Your brain adjusts insufficiently away from the anchor. That is not persuasion. That is cognitive bias. Scarcity works because uncertainty feels threatening. Scarcity is often oversimplified as limited supply increases value.
The psychology is deeper. Research in commodity theory by psychologist Stephen Warchel suggests that items become more desirable when their availability is restricted, especially if the restriction feels sudden. It is not just rarity, it is the threat of losing access, and that connects directly to loss aversion from prospect theory. When a website says, "only 2 left," it activates the possibility of loss, not gaining the item, losing the opportunity, and the brain reacts more strongly to avoiding loss than acquiring gain. Scarcity triggers anxiety. Anxiety accelerates decisions. Accelerated decisions reduce critical thinking. That is the mechanism. Social proof is about safety, not popularity. Robert Cialdini's work on influence identified social proof as a core persuasion principle, but later research clarified something important. We conform not because we admire the crowd. We conform because the crowd signals safety. Solomon Asch's conformity experiments showed that individuals would publicly agree with incorrect group judgments about line length, even when the answer was obviously wrong. Why? Because standing alone feels socially risky. From an evolutionary perspective, isolation meant vulnerability. When you see bestseller or 10,000 5-star review, your brain interprets it as reduced risk. If others survive this choice, I probably will too. It is not about popularity. It is about perceived security. The decoy effect is context manipulation. Behavioral economist Dan Ariely popularized the decoy effect, but the underlying principle is relative comparison. In a well-known pricing experiment involving subscription options, adding a clearly inferior option increased selection of the higher-priced premium choice. The decoy does not need to sell. It exists to reshape comparison. Human beings struggle to evaluate value in isolation. We evaluate comparatively. When a slightly worse option is placed next to a premium one, the premium option feels justified. The choice architecture guides perception. This concept is now widely known as choice architecture, a term associated with Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein in their work on behavioral public policy. Marketing uses it constantly. Ownership changes value, the endowment effect. Kahneman, Knecht, and Thaler demonstrated in multiple experiments that people assign greater value to items simply because they own them. Participants given a mug demanded significantly more money to sell it than others were willing to pay to acquire it. Nothing changed about the mug, only ownership changed. Free trials operate on this principle. Once you personalize an account, upload your photos, build your playlist, or configure your setting, the product feels integrated into your identity. Canceling it feels like losing part of something that is yours. And because losses loom larger than gains, you hesitate. It feels like loss, not neutrality. Variable rewards hijack attention. B.F. Skinner's research on operant conditioning showed that behaviors reinforced on variable ratio schedules are the most resistant to extinction. In simple terms, unpredictable rewards create persistent behavior. Slot machines are built on this model. So are social media notifications. So are flash sale alerts. You do not know when the reward will appear. That uncertainty keeps you engaged. Dopamine is not released when you receive the reward. It spikes in anticipation of unpredictable reward. Modern digital marketing platforms understand this extremely well. Fluency feels like truth. Psychologist Norbert Schwartz and colleagues demonstrated that information presented in easy-to-read fonts is judged as more credible than identical information presented in difficult fonts. This is called processing fluency. When something feels easy to process, your brain interprets it as familiar, and familiarity feels safe. Simple branding, clean website, short slogan. They reduce cognitive load. Reduced effort increases trust. It is not about aesthetic. It is about mental efficiency. Emotional shift, the real issue. Now let us clarify something important. Marketing is not mind control. These tactics do not override free will. What they do is influence the environment in which your decisions are made. They increase emotional intensity. They reduce deliberation time. They shift reference point. They guide attention. You still decide, but you decide within a psychologically shaped environment. That distinction matters because awareness restores cognitive space. Ending. Reclaiming attention. The next time urgency rises in your body while shopping online, pause. Notice the feeling before acting on it. Ask yourself, what reference point am I using? What loss am I trying to avoid? Is this scarcity real or engineered? You do not need to reject marketing. You need to recognize it, because the most powerful upgrade you can give your mind is not resistance, it is awareness. And once you understand how influence works, you stop being unconsciously guided and you start choosing deliberately. This is Minecraft Lab, where we do not just explore psychology, we apply it. I will see you in the next one.